Hi, this is Nino Gonzalez, and welcome to another episode of Making Sense. Well, today I have a student of mine from El Paso Community College, Anna Smith. Anna, thank you for being here and taking time out of your busy schedule. I know we're coming close to finals and agreeing to do this show with me. And tell me a little bit about yourself, Anna.
I'm an accounting major, and I hope to graduate in December. And I've seen a few episodes here and there of the EPCC TV.
Right.
So I'm just looking forward to finishing, really.
Right. So that would be December of
This year.
2016,
Yes.
correct? Okay. Well, great. And how have you enjoyed your experience here with the accounting program at El Paso Community College?
I have enjoyed it. I've learned a lot. It has been very eye-opening. I feel that there's just so many things out there. There was a saying, somebody said many years ago, I said, you never stop learning. I believe it now. You never stop learning.
All right.
The times change, and we've got to change with them.
And what background do you come from that you decided to take accounting?
A business background. There was a small concentration in sales.
Right.
And with sales comes numbers.
Right.
And so in order for me to have a little bit more in-depth understanding of how those things tie together, I felt like having an accounting background would help a little.
Great. And as you're getting closer to graduation, I'm sure you're out there trying to pursue looking for a job and things like that. And we've provided you with some leads, and hopefully those leads will turn into something that you can start a career, right?
Right. Through career services, they've also helped me to refine my skills.
Great.
So I'm just looking forward to those better opportunities and meeting people and networking, having conversations with some of my other fellow students to see what they're doing. We're sharing at this point.
Right.
So we're all going to be doing the same thing.
Okay. Well, I wish you the best of luck as the semester comes to the end, and great success on the finals and all those projects that are coming up due within a week or so.
Within a week.
Within a week or so. But I brought you in because I'd like to have a discussion on a current topic that's hot right now. As we all know, the music artist Prince passed away.
Yes.
And he was 57 years old. But one of the things that we hear and that's been coming out is that he died without a will.
Correct.
And I did a show a couple of episodes back, and I brought an attorney in, and we talked about the importance of probate and having a will and estate planning and guardianships. But I'd like to touch base on that more because, this is a well-known celebrity, artist, and it's important that we start planning because we don't know when death is going to happen. We really don't. We really don't know it, and we shouldn't put that aside. And what's going to happen, and it's going to be interesting to see with the Prince case is that people are going to start coming out of the woodwork and challenging some of the things. As a matter of fact, I think this a few days ago, one of the judges already appointed a corporate trust to run his business affairs and so forth, since he had so many business affairs and of course the publishing rights and all of that. But I think there's already been a claim from somebody in California who said that he had been given some of the music catalog, whether that's valid or not. But the thing is, if we're not prepared,
Right.
Look at the money that's going to be spent.
Right.
And what you're going to put your family members through that you don't realize due to not proper planning.
Right.
But let's take a look at this. I looked at a statistic, and it was mentioned that 64% of Americans do not have a will.
I believe it.
And let me ask you, do you have a will, Anna?
I have something very minimal in place.
Okay.
Because I do have a daughter.
Okay.
And I do have the experience of both sides. A person that deceased that had something in place, but in my opinion, it was a rushed
It was too rushed.
It was too rushed.
Okay.
And then I also have the experience that there was a person that passed away who didn't have anything in place, and then it was for properties.
Okay.
So.
And how do you, can you elaborate a little bit more on that situation where you felt that it was rushed?
As you mentioned, many times we plan for a lot of things, but we're not planning for that particular moment. And all of a sudden illness comes in and you think, oh, it's going to be okay. I'm going to make it. And then it gets progressively worse.
Right.
And then that's where I feel like you start making rush decisions. Then they ask you in the hospital. They ask you, do you have something in place? Now they're putting it in your mind. Oh, do I have something or not? And for a lot of different reasons.
Sure.
One of them in regards to your care, and the other one is in regards to your estate or whatever things you have. So when you're ill, you're not thinking about those things.
That's correct.
And so you have something maybe very minimal in place just to say, oh, I got it covered.
Right.
But then the ramifications of that, when the person passes away, and like you mentioned, you go and you have to contact a lawyer, go through the probate courts, it's going to cost you money. Then you start facing the reality that you have to find a person that's going to make the right decisions and make reference to the document that you left,
right,
and hope that that person does what that paper says,
right,
what that
and
document.
Not only that, if it's a rush situation and if that will was done in the hospital while you're maybe heavily medicated, that can be challenged because you might not be of proper sound mind, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yes, so you're lucky if the people that are involved and mentioned in the will are okay and they say, we agree, we know the situation. But then there'll be those members that say, oh, but he or she told me X, Y, and Z.
Right.
But they're not mentioned. So then now you've got to go back and now you might have a dispute.
Right, and one of the things that happens is that I see a lot of families being torn apart and arguing, especially when there's a death in the family, and especially when it comes to those situations whether there's a lot of money involved or not.
Right.
And then, right, for example, in one of my situations with on my wife's side of the family, her great grandmother passed away, and she did not have a will, and now she had some property, and this property is now going up for auction because nobody has stepped up to the plate to pay the back property taxes. Not only that, so they go down the line, the heirs, and they name you in the suit. And not only that, now it's reported on your credit report that you have a judgment against you, a legal judgment against you, and it ruins your credit. And some of those people are now not living, and the ones who take responsibility of that are their children or whoever's down the line, where, why do you want to put your family through that? And just think of the possibility that it can happen. And we mentioned that 64% of Americans do not have wills, but it comes to mind that 74% are Hispanic that do not have wills. And do you think that's a cultural thing?
I do believe it's a cultural thing. At least in my family, it was your parents hoped that they raised you right and that you paid attention to whatever it was that they were doing.
Right.
And that you learned those lessons and remember them. So then they leave nothing in order and say, oh, she'll know what to do because I raised her right. Or him, Right. But at the end of that, they're not keeping in mind that laws change, people's situation change. Your kids can be doing awesome right now, but then if you get placed in a financial situation where now you're distressed, maybe because your parents got sick, now you're distressed. Now it's right, a whole other conversation that I feel should be an ongoing conversation. Just like every day you you know, you could be with your partner, your spouse, with your kids. What happened today? What was your events?
Right.
Then it should be the same thing. You should look at that every year or every couple of years and say, okay, what's happening right now? How should I update this? Because that is a reality. But I think that in the culture, they got this.
No, but I think also in the Hispanic culture it's very hard to talk about money and death.
Yes.
Because, you know, I recall a lot of times, you know, with family members, and you start discussing about wills and financial planning, and, oh, you just want a piece of the money, or you're already putting me 6 feet under and you want your part now, and
Right.
let's not discuss this.
Right.
And there's a lot of tension and a lot of anger that goes with that.
You know, I know somebody that they're of age, they're an ill person, and she decided based on a very, very whim conversation about making final arrangements. She left a letter and she wanted to have it notarized and say, oh, this notarized letter is going to be enough. You know what to do, and let me show you where I put the letter. And, you know, we all kind of looked at each other and said, oh, okay, that's okay. But, you know, if you really want to leave things in order. That conversation led to, I'm going to pay for, prepay my funeral arrangements and so on and so forth. In the process of all this, you know, you find out things about people that, for example, she didn't want anybody to know that, she didn't want to be published that she passed away in the newspaper.
Right. Or maybe they might want to be cremated instead, right?
She didn't want a picture, and it was like, oh, well, I'm okay if you put it, but don't put a picture. Well, why are you okay with this, but you're not okay with this? Oh, right. No. Somebody can do something to my picture. But, you know, culture.
Right.
Culture.
And I think with you know, that was a staggering statistic that 74% of Hispanics do not have a will. And when we're talking about the overall population, 70% of those that are between 45 and 54 do not have a will, and 54% of 55 to 64 of age do not have a will. And of course, the 54% Prince falls under one of those because he was 57 years old.
And I think also, I think there's two sides. There's a side where maybe the parents, you know, the older, you're discussing age. So let's go with the older population. Maybe the 55 to 64 do want to have that conversation,
right.
But the kids don't. So now there's a barrier. I mean, oh no, that's not gonna happen. You know, and it leaves you to just kind of, okay, so we're not having that conversation. And so maybe that's why they don't do anything.
Right.
Or it's the other way. If you're the child, it doesn't matter how old you are, and even if your parents are in the 54, 55, and you're trying to have a conversation based on anything, something you saw on TV or something that you experienced, or, you know, something, they don't want to have that conversation. So it just seems like nobody's comfortable having that conversation.
Yeah, that's true. Well, we'll be right back and continue this discussion on the importance of having a will and being prepared before something happens. So we'll be right back. Thank you. Welcome to the second half of Making Sense, and I was discussing the importance of estate planning, or having something in place and having your wishes known with Anna, one of my El Paso Community College students. And so, you know, we were mentioning all these statistics, and, you know, another one that was staggering is that 92% of those that are under the age of 35 do not have a will. And, you know, well, that makes sense because you're younger, but I think especially if you're a single parent, a lot of us think that our kids are going to be left with who we want to, but
Right.
that's not the case if you don't spell it out, because the state is going to decide where your kids are going to wind up.
Correct.
And there could be a fight regarding
Correct.
that custody.
So there's two different fights there. If somebody wants them and can handle and take care of them,
Right.
or somebody does not. So that forced me to have things in place because I have a child. And so in experiencing certain family events that involve death, some that were planned, some that were not, It forced me to bring a lot of things to reality. But if I have the same conversation with my friends who have not experienced,
Correct.
It's a very different conversation.
Sure.
And they totally dismiss it. And just recently I had a conversation with a friend of mine who had a health scare, and she came to me, she says, Anna, I don't know what I'm gonna do, there's a lot of things. And she had a 17-year-old and a 12-year-old. And I said, now is the time for you to realize.
And I, one of the things I think that's important is that age does not matter.
No.
And also the value of the items that you have does not matter.
Correct.
Because you need to make your wishes known. And sometimes we want to do it ourselves. There's websites we can go to, but sometimes that can backfire because depending on the complexity of the situations, and nowadays, the way relationships are, we could be in our second, third, fourth relationship.
Correct.
And we could have kids from many different relationships, or maybe
blended
love childs, or whatever. But they all come out. And a lot of us think, and it was 13% of people do not do a will because they believe that a spouse and or children will automatically receive everything, and that's not the case. For example, it all depends on a state-by-state basis. So if you've already had past relationships and been married and had past children, well, that's not going to be the case.
Right. And that's the thing that I try to explain. My friend, for example, she says, well, my oldest daughter will take care of my youngest. I said, you really need to make sure that you have this conversation with both your daughters. And most importantly, you know what, Mr. Gonzalez, you can have everything in place, but if your person or your children do not know where to go to get that information, who do they call? What is the name of the company? What does it matter?
And not only that, let your family know where you have the will documents and all of this. But one important thing that you brought up, and I was looking at this since we're in a digital age, 63% of individuals don't have a digital estate. Wow. Now we need to be worried about a digital estate, such as your Facebook accounts, your Twitter accounts, your eBay, PayPal, credit card accounts, bank accounts. Who's going to access those? And what do you have in place? They suggest that you write down all the sites that you belong to, and with usernames and passwords, and have them stored away, and make it known to somebody that if you pass away, to be able to take care of these issues.
I didn't even think about that.
What's going to happen to your Facebook page when you pass away? I mean, I don't have a Facebook page, but what is going to happen to that? And Facebook even has a policy for family members to access that account if there's a deceased, but you have to go through that process.
Okay.
Yeah, so can you imagine now there's even a digital estate?
Yeah, another cost to worry.
Yeah, and what's, we were talking about how in the Hispanic culture, 74% don't have wills, and we don't like to talk about financial matters. We don't like to talk about death. They always think, oh, you already want your share now.
Correct.
Or you're being greedy.
Correct.
But let's take a look at the overall population, and this is something funny that I found, that 32% of Americans would rather do their taxes, get a root canal, or give up sex for a month than create or update their will. Wow. Is it that painful of a process to be prepared?
It's not painful, but you do need to be organized, and you need to know exactly what it is that you want to be included. If you want to include only one piece of jewelry, if you want to include one piece of furniture, your car, all these things, whether it's a lot or a little, like you mentioned, if it has a lot of value or a little value. My grandmother, when she passed away, before she passed away, she started passing out. She's like, okay, mijita, you like this? Here, you can have it.
Sure.
And I have a box, I don't know, it's 12 by 12 probably. And she says, here you go. They're of no value to anybody but me. But she did that because she knew one day it was going to happen.
And sometimes these assets or this property cannot be transferred that easily
No.
without a legal document.
Correct.
And you need that. But it's not just the will, it's also having powers of attorney, you know,
Correct.
regarding medical issues, regarding financial issues if you were to become incapacitated, or you know, even a living will. What is it that you want to be done in case there's no other signs of life, you know, brain activity or things like that, and guardianship. Who's going to take care of you if that were to happen? So it's not just the will, but it's a whole
Correct.
package. I mean, I'm not an attorney, and I'm not trying to provide legal advice here, but I'm just trying to provide just sensible, commonsensical advice that we all need to be aware and we need to be prepared. And with the issue of you know, Prince passing away, and without him having a will and his estate being worth billions of dollars,
I heard it was 150 million.
Wow.
150 million, and one stepbrother or half brother.
Well, has one full sister, and I think what has been, he has 5 surviving half siblings who could share in that estate, but of course that's for the state to determine, and then there's I'm sure gonna be a lot of fighting over it. But let's take a look at this. This was, while I was researching this topic, some people that died without a will. Abraham Lincoln. He was an attorney. And
the irony of that,
I know,
there's a saying for that, that, you know, like the carpenter, he does all this good work, but then his house doesn't have,
or the mechanic,
you know, he fixes everybody's car and his car's not running. So somehow I'm not shocked.
But you know, he left an $85,000 estate, which today would be worth 1.2 million. But you know, just one of those things. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. He did not have a lot of tangible assets, but his image,
Correct.
his copyrighted works, his Nobel Peace Prize, even his Bible. And this is what I found interesting, is that in 2015, his heirs could still not settle on an agreement, and it's still in court. They're still fighting it.
Yes.
They're still fighting that. So can you imagine how many years have gone by and how much court costs and attorney's fees you've spent just to deal with this?
I can imagine, because when I was processing my paperwork, just to have certain things in order that were very important at the time, which was guardianship of my daughter.
Right.
I did ask, and you know, how does this work? How many years? You know, what are we looking at? Because I know people will come out of the woodworks and contest it.
Right.
And I knew that. So that's another thing too, that you need to know your family. You need to know whoever it is that you're associating with.
And you know, there's a saying that goes, is that you don't know the true colors of individual, even family members, until you go into business with them, or there's a tragedy in the family, such as a death in the family, and
Correct.
then those true colors really start coming out, and you're asking yourself, why did this happen? But greed has so much control. You know, it's human nature with a lot of people, and greed can affect a lot of people in so many different ways.
And I think I agree with you that I do agree that it's greed, but I think it's only a part of it. I think there's a lot of emotional stuff tied to that, and I think that a lot of people want to validate whatever's in the document to say, I was very important.
Right.
And that is not what the document is for.
Whether there's a lot of dollar value or not.
Correct. They just want to know that they counted, that they were important, and that they mattered, and that's tied to the emotion, unfortunately.
Yeah, but a lot of other artists, Jimi Hendrix passed away without a will, and after several legal battles, the fortune passed to his father, but the intellectual property, you know, the copyrights,
Yes.
30 years and $1 million in fees, continued fighting until just last year, 2015.
So I guess my question would be, for example, Jimi Hendrix, for example, Prince, that they had their copyrights to their music and all that. They had to have a lawyer for that.
Right.
So they already had a lawyer. Why wouldn't they put their estate, you know?
And so some of these deaths were premature because of lifestyle choices, such as, you know, Kurt Cobain also, the singer from Nirvana, died without a will. James Brown, Tupac. But all of these artists, they continue making money even after death. And a lot of money. even more after death. And so that's why it's important to have those estate plans in place. But one of the other things was Howard Hughes, the eccentric billionaire. And he left no will. So guess what? His estate was divided among cousins, 22 cousins, whether you know them or what,
or not,
or you like them or not. But you know, that's what the court says. Is you got to find the. So if there was no brothers, there was no sisters, no spouse, no children, then you have to go down the line.
You know, and then that's something interesting that a couple years back I heard and had a conversation with somebody that they left it in writing, for example, that they wanted to have their body donated to science.
Right.
Because they had no family, they had, nobody, they knew nobody was going to visit, there was not going to be any of that. So they were in the medical field. So they understood the process of, so then they wanted to do that. I would have never thought about it unless I would have heard. And this is an example that it was like, oh, well, maybe there would have been a different choice because like you said, there's people that maybe this family that you didn't even know. You have a big family, but that doesn't mean you know everybody.
Right.
So I don't know.
There was another story I was reading was Steve McNair, a professional football player who was killed in a murder-suicide from his girlfriend, but he was married. And he did not leave a will, but he was very generous to his mother and bought her a house. Okay. Well, then his wife basically took the property and kicked the mom out. And but because those wishes were not directed in a will. Correct.
It was not taken care of.
Yeah.
And you can't automatically assume that people are going to believe and do as you have been doing.
Yeah. And a lot of states, especially Texas, they require self-proving affidavits. So that means you must have two witnesses and it must be notarized that you did make these statements and you did do this will. Because then if you don't, then that can be contested. And one perfect example is, remember George Jefferson, Sherman Hemsley?
Yes.
Who resided here in El Paso, and he died here in El Paso. Well, he left a written document, but it was challenged because a brother, that came out of the woodwork, and he couldn't be buried. His body was in a refrigerator for 3 months because the will was being contested because there was no self-proving affidavits. So why do we want to put people through this if all it takes is a little bit of planning? And that's one thing I want to leave the audience with is that find yourself. Sometimes even doing it yourself is better than not doing it at all, but make sure that all those forms are appropriate. And if not, there's attorneys that charge different fees, and I'm sure we can find one out there that can do that for us. Yes. So thank you, Ana, for coming by.
You're welcome.
And good luck on your finals, and we'll see you next time on another episode of Making Sense. Goodbye. Let's just keep talking.